Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining this webinar for the 2026 Whole Foods Market Foundation Garden Grant Cycle. My name is Ashley Ellis. I'm the program manager for the Improving Children's Nutrition work at the Whole Foods Market Foundation. And I'm joined today by Andrea Valadez, who is our program operations manager, also on the foundation. And we will share information with you. You'll hear from Andrea a little bit later in the presentation. Okay, so first things first, this is a great QR code to grab. I think all of this is also pinned in the chat. The QR code will take you to our website. And within the website, you'll find our garden grant page within the Improving Children's Nutrition section. And actually, our email address is probably not pinned in the chat. So this is a good one to either write down or you can find through the website as well. But oh gosh, there's actually a typo in the there's a typo in the email address, but that's okay. We'll put in the chat the correct email address, and then by the time I send these slides out, I'll correct that. But so yes, so I want you guys all to have this. Our website and specifically the Garden Grant page is the first and best place to go for all things Garden Grant related, and we'll answer so many of your questions and provide resources, and just it's a great one-stop shop. So definitely take a look at the website if you haven't already, and then keep our email handy because there are going to be times where you'll have questions that aren't answered on our website or maybe are specific to your school, and we'd be super happy to answer those by email. I will say, please try to be patient with us. And in the height of Garden Grant busy season, which is this month and the next couple months, we can take up to 3 business days to reply. So if you don't hear from us, try to just wait a couple days. And if you then don't hear from us after, I would say 3 business days, you can try us again. But we do the best we can to keep up. It's myself, Andrea, and one other person. And so sometimes we just get swamped and do our best to crawl out from under the email pile. Okay, so today's webinar. So as Andrea pinned in the chat, we love to hear from you in the chat and say hi. But if you have questions about the Garden Grant, questions about the work, questions about how to apply, I think we'll answer a lot of those in the webinar, but you can also use the Q&A function, which is separate from the chat function, to ask your questions there. And we should have at the end of today's webinar 10 to 15 minutes for to be able to address those questions. We will also have an entire second webinar on Monday, February 16th, where I'll only present for maybe 15 minutes, and then the entire 45 minutes, the rest of that webinar will be all for your questions. And so definitely, if you have a pressing question today, you can ask us in the Q&A function. We'll try to get to it today in the webinar. If not, of course, you can always email us. And then a great third option, especially for questions that come up after today, and as you begin to look at the application and fill it out, I do recommend also attending the webinar on the 16th as well. And then both webinars will be recorded, and the recording as well as slides will be sent out via email to everyone who registered. And they'll also be posted on our website. So all of this will be available to you as a resource. Okay, so for the agenda, for today, I'll give a quick overview of the work that we do at the Whole Foods Market Foundation and address kind of the name change as well that you might be noticing if you've known about us for a little bit. And then we will dive into the grant itself. We'll talk about eligibility, the requirements for the grant, what it entails, a timeline. I'll give you so many resources and point you toward resources. And then Andrea will lead us through kind of a guided tour of starting like everything from logging in for the first time to the grant management system, starting an account, registering your school or organization, and starting an application. So that's going to be the second half of this webinar. And then, like I said, we should have hopefully 10, 15 minutes at the end for any of your questions that come up in the Q&A. Okay, so quick overview of us and who we are. So in 2024, Whole Cities, Whole Kids, and Whole Planet, which were three separate foundations, we three came together under one nonprofit roof as the Whole Foods Market Foundation. So a lot of the work that we were all doing really remains and is strong, and our mission and purpose is strong and unchanged, but we are now housed under one roof. And so also the work that formerly kind of was referred to as whole kids, that term isn't necessarily going away, but you'll see more and more we'll say improving children's nutrition. And so that's really what that is there. We're talking about the same thing. And you'll see more the Whole Foods Market Foundation logo, the one on top. I did want to note, as you'll see, the Whole Foods Market Foundation mission is really similar to and really in line with what was the Whole Kids mission. Whole Foods Market Foundation is on a mission to nourish people by advancing food security, improving nutrition, and strengthening resilient food systems. So yeah, let's see. Okay, and so how do we do that? In a lot of different ways and really cool ways. Today, you're here to learn about the Garden Grant, but we also have a lot of other incredible programs in the improving children's nutrition space, as well as the other areas that I mentioned as well. And some of the other improving children's nutrition programs include we have a bee grant that I'll tell you a little bit more about in the next slide because it's a great complement to the Garden Grant. And we manage the bee grant and the Garden Grant ourselves. We also have a really wonderful virtual online resource called the Healthy Staff Program that's available to anyone and also counts as continuing education credit in the US. That can be found on our website. And then we fund a lot of incredible work through partner organizations like the Chef Ann Foundation, National Farm to School Network, Life Lab, and some other really wonderful programs, including programs that transform school food, both at the school level, at the district level, and even on like a bigger kind of building capacity level, also the individual level, like fellowships. Yeah, so everything from salad bars to individual fellowships to entire district transformation. We fund a ton of different work in that space and a lot of really, really exciting stuff. So please do take a look at all of our other programs. We love when grantees can look at our other programs and see where you can get involved in more than just one. So a little bit more about the Bee Grant because it is such a wonderful complement to the Garden Grant. This is a grant for schools valued at $2,500. There's two different types. There is a monetary grant where you kind of pick the type of hive that you want and do your own setup. Then there's also what's called an observation hive, which is really cool. And it's indoors and it's kind of this like glass pane hive. So a lot of schools will put that in their library or science classrooms and use that to learn more about bees. We co-administer and coordinate this grant in consultation with the Bee Project, sorry, the Bee Cause Project. And they will also provide, as part of the grant, one-on-one direct consultation with grantees. And they're a wonderful organization. So a lot of grantees will get or be interested in both the Garden Grant and the Bee Grant. And that's awesome. We super encourage that. Of course, it's not required, but encouraged. Okay, so this humble slide I think is so impressive. Since 2012, when we started issuing garden grants at what we were calling Whole Kids, we've invested over $24 million into 9,650 schools and organizations that support over 6 million children. I think this is so cool and so exciting. I'm so happy to be a part of this, and I'm so glad that you are all here today. Our cycle this year for the 2026 Garden Grant will get us over the 10,000 schools mark, which is really exciting. And yeah, I just think this is an incredible legacy and a wonderful thing. So we're happy to be here and we're glad you're here. Why gardens? Well, this one's going to be preaching to the choir probably for most of you, but we do think it's important to touch on that kind of baseline of like, why are we here? Wait, why are we doing this, right? We really believe and have seen evidence both in scientific research as well as directly in our own grant programs. We see that connecting kids to food sparks their curiosity, it gets them excited, and ultimately that leads to increased fruit and vegetable consumption. So this is awesome. And really, this is all coming down to improving children's nutrition. Gardens are a wonderful, fun, hands-on way to do that. Who do we support? We support with this grant schools across the US and Canada, public schools and nonprofit private schools. And it can be any type of edible garden, new or existing. So whether you have a garden, you want to revamp it, or whether you're like, we don't have anything, but we're just getting into this and this is our first entry, all of that is great. Any type of garden too, everything from hydroponic, aquaponic to in-ground to raised beds to tower gardens to greenhouses and everything in between. All of that is fair game. And we see across the spectrum, we see all of it. We prioritize awarding applicants who are encountering barriers to accessing healthy food and nutrition education. And this has really always been our focus. Like we're all about awarding schools and really prioritizing the schools that need it most and where the population needs it the most. We usually receive around 1,000 applications each year, and this year we will fund 850. So this is actually really amazing. That's a very high approval rate compared to what it used to be and compared to other grants. And I do just want to call that out because as you will see if you haven't seen the grant already, or if you do already see it, then you'll know that like it's not an insignificant grant. I know that it's, you know, it's a fair amount of work that we're asking of you. But I'm really proud that we do fund this year 850 out of probably 1,000 applications. So that's a pretty great approval rate. And we really, really want to fund your garden. So we definitely encourage you to apply. Okay, what is included? It is a $3,500 monetary grant. And we really are asking you to tell us the plan. We are not prescriptive. I'm not going to tell you you have to do raised beds or you have to do this or that. We love all the different ways that schools have come up with to teach gardening and nutrition education at their schools. So you tell us the plan. Um, and we also are really fortunate this year to have Newman's Own Foundation as an additional donor in supporting our schools in this garden grant. What are we looking for? We are looking for youth involvement in the garden, of course, right? That's what it's really all about. We're looking for that connection to healthy eating. So yes, it's true that just having kids engage in gardens at all is incredible and like does lead to increased fruit and vegetable consumption. But ideally, you're also making those connections in your curriculum, in doing tastings, in your after school, maybe. There's so many different ways you can do this, but we really do like to see and look to see if you're connecting to healthy eating in your garden and nutrition programs. We also really love to see and encourage integrating garden and nutrition education into your curriculum itself and into the academics. So not just maybe having the garden there for free time or for after school, but and also not just for a dedicated garden class, which is great, of course. But are there other ways you can integrate the garden into your school? Can you teach math classes in the garden, art in the garden? Can you harvest seeds and then use it in a history lesson? There's so many cool ways to do this. And also, just a quick aside and plug, if you're like, this world is maybe new to you, or you just want more information about how to incorporate the garden into different parts of your school and curriculum, I will be co-hosting a webinar with Pilot Light, an incredible nonprofit organization. That's going to be on March 5th. And that is entirely focused on integrating garden education throughout the school curriculum. So definitely, and that's of course free to attend. It'll be on March 5th. We will post that link. I'll put it in the chat toward the end, and where else is it posted? Probably our socials. So definitely sign up for that if you're interested. Okay. We do look for administrative buy-in. So that's typically the principal or the head of school. And that's really important to know that your school is bought in and approved of this idea. The sustainability of your garden and garden program is so important to us. So sustainability, not just in terms of environmental sustainability, although that's very important as well, but we think about, in this context, we're thinking about the longevity of the garden program. So we really want it to be the case that we give you a garden grant and then your garden and garden program can flourish for many years after that. We know that the $3,500 cannot last forever, of course. And so we look for all the ways that you are engaging with your community and have different stakeholders and have different, plans for financial longevity and things like that. And then we also look for a thorough and thoughtful garden plan. Now, caveat, that does not mean you have to be an experienced gardener or even have any experience at all to fill out this application to apply for or receive a garden grant. You absolutely do not. But I will say, like, I will, and our reviewers, we're going to look for plans in your application that match your level of expertise. So if you are an experienced gardener, then I'll look to see that your plans are matching that level. If you're not an experienced gardener, totally fine. But what are the ways that you are seeking out that education? Are you maybe doing a training or an online course or anything to get some of the basics of gardening? So we are here to meet you where you're at. And we also have tons of resources for whatever stage you're at in terms of gardening experience and garden education. Okay, a little bit about the application itself. I wanted to note that, again, I kind of touched on this, like the application, it's not super short, we know. And that's absolutely not just to be long or to be a pain or to be a burden. Like that's the last thing we want. Most of you guys are teachers, parents, administrators, and I know how busy you are, and I really respect your time. But I really do think that it's important to know that the garden application itself is not just an application for you to be applying to this grant to get money. It also the application itself can serve as a great resource. It can really be a blueprint for your garden and your garden program. It's something that you can take to the principal or you can take to the board or whatever, your teachers, and say like, we're going to have a garden program and this is my plan. This is our plan. You can use it to get people engaged and excited, maybe form a committee. And so, the application is going to have everything from the budget, how would you like to spend these funds, to how are you going to engage the community? How are you going to get volunteers? How are you going to maintain the garden year over year? And all of the above. And so, yes, it can be a wonderful resource. Also, I did want to say too, we provide feedback on every application that we receive. Whether or not you get funded, you will get some customized feedback specific to your application. So you're not left wondering like, well, if I didn't get it, but I have no idea why, you will get feedback that points out areas where you can improve in the application for next time or for other grants. Use of grant funds. So, kind of touched on this a little bit, but absolutely, grant funds can be used whether you have an existing garden or a brand new garden and any type of garden materials, garden education materials, outdoor classroom materials, nutrition demo materials, cooking class materials. There's so many things that you could use these grant funds on. Really, like the world is your oyster. We have three things we ask you not to spend the grant funds on, which you'll see at the bottom, and that's real estate, travel funds like buses, and then field trips, so related. And that's really not that those aren't wonderful things as well, but for the size of the grant and what it's for, we're really wanting these funds to focus on your school site itself and on the grant or on the garden that is at your school. And you can use some of this funding for, say you are inexperienced as a gardener and you're like, well, I really want to start a garden program, but gosh, I need to know at least the first thing about starting a garden so that I can help maintain it. You can absolutely use grant funds for trainings or any kind of like educational materials for like yourself as a teacher, principal, whatever role. We do just ask that that's limited to 30% of the grant, which is about $1,050. And that's just because we want to make sure that the funds also go toward the garden itself and get to be, the kids get to benefit from the funds as well. Okay, What are the requirements of the grant? There are not a ton of requirements. We're really proud that this is a very flexible grant. We do encourage and ask that you start spending the funds within a year of receiving them, but you do not by any means have to spend all of the funds by the end of the first year. In fact, there is no expiration date to the grant. There is no deadline by which all the grant funds must be spent. Right now, we have a progress report that is prompted of each applicant about a year after you receive the grant, but we're working on a way to make that more flexible so that if you get to the 1 year mark and you're like, well, I only spent 1,000, so I can tell you, but I want the chance to spend more of this grant. We're working on a way to make that more flexible so that you can report back to us after you've spent the funds. We won't necessarily ask for receipts, so there's not going to be like receipt uploading in the portal or anything like that, but the grant agreement, and I think it's like tax purposes, requires you to keep receipts on hand for a number of years. Yeah, and then I touched on the progress report. Okay, eligibility. Our eligibility criteria are we are funding schools, right, in the US and Canada, schools that serve the K through 12 grade range. Now, just a quick note there, preschool can absolutely be included, but we're not funding only preschools or schools that are only early education centers. There are other wonderful grants that do target that age range, but we are targeting the K through 12 age range, and totally fine if pre-K is included in there as well. At least 10 students at the school and enrolled at the school and engaged in garden programming. Can be any public school or registered nonprofit private school. It could be a tribally controlled school through the Bureau of Indian Education, etc. So and I will say, like, it can get a little, Andrea will do a great demo later of how to register. It can get a little confusing. And so if you have a special case, like your school, then definitely you can reach out to us by email, and we're super happy to help. Gardens must be on school grounds. I'll just note here too that previously, if you're like returning grantee, we did previously award this grant to organizations as well, like gardens that were on organizational grounds, for example, museums and libraries. And while that's wonderful, and maybe we will get back to that at some point in the future, for now, we're really focusing our grant funding on schools themselves and on gardens that are on school grounds. Now, organizations are absolutely a critical and huge part of school gardens and can be fiscal sponsors, can be community partners, can be volunteers. There's so many ways to engage with orgs, but we are funding, this grant is for gardens on school grounds. And then growing edible food. So not to say that you can't grow things like flowers for butterflies or bees, or something that's ornamental, or trees that don't produce edible food. That's all fine. We just ask that you are growing edible food with the grant funds, because we have our focus on improving children's nutrition. A little bit more about eligibility. This is for returning grantees. So the grant can be what we call a renewal grant, meaning if you have received a garden grant from us before, you're eligible for one more grant for a maximum of 2 garden grants. As like a lifetime maximum. We do ask that you wait 1 year in between. So if anyone was from the 2025 garden grant cycle, you're not eligible just yet, but you will be next year. But if you are from the 2024 cycle or before, and you've only received 1 grant from us, and if you have filled out your progress report and basically have spent the funds as well, then you are eligible for a renewal grant. Okay, application requirements. So we do ask for a letter of support from school leadership. Typically that's the principal, but sometimes that's an executive director or other head of school. And again, like, this is so important that your school leadership is bought into the garden, not only like ideologically and for that support, but also because if we grant you this grant and then the principal is not aware and they say, you want to do what with my grass? That can be really tough, and we don't want that to happen. So this is about getting permission beforehand. And you'll submit that through a letter on the principal's letterhead. We also ask that you have a community partner. Now, this can be really broadly defined. This could be a nonprofit organization, it could be a local business, it could be master gardeners. But really, this is about having the community engaged in your school garden, and sustainability and longevity. They can help provide expertise. Maybe they could be hands for a garden build day. There's so many different ways that community partners can engage. And we have found that school gardens that have community partners are more successful. So that's why we've made this a requirement of our garden grant. We also ask for photos and or a garden plan. And so if you have an existing garden, we love to see photos. If you don't yet have a garden, still send us a photo of where the garden will be. I'll show an example. And then a garden plan can be a diagram, can be hand drawn, paint, whatever. Letter of support. Okay, I think I kind of already touched on this. Yes, so it's very important to have buy-in. And we'll look for that letter, and it is required. Community partner. What is oh yeah, I'm seeing in the chat an example of community partnership. Yeah, so an example would be we have, I was trying to think if I have examples on this slide, but I've seen Home Depot, I've seen local gardening stores, I've seen groups of master gardeners, like if you have a public university in your area, there are a lot of like extension services, and master gardeners often are part of that. That can be a wonderful, wonderful resource. And they actually are mandated to do like volunteer hours. And so a lot of master gardeners pair up with schools to provide expertise. Sometimes they provide plants and all kinds of things, workshops even. Okay. And then I will say the PTA or PTO, so your parent teacher organization of the school, that does not qualify as the community partner, because we're looking for an entity that is external to the school. And again, that's just really about like building a community that makes sure your school garden program is not existing in isolation, because community is so important and helpful. If you do have a fiscal sponsor, they can be the community partner unless it's a parent teacher organization. But say your community partner is like a local nonprofit that does like garden education or something, they can absolutely be both your fiscal sponsor and a community partner. Yeah, and I think I addressed these last points. Like, yeah, I've seen everything from in-kind donations, like donating plants and seeds and shovels, to volunteer support, to monetary support, to advice, consultation, lessons. There's so many different ways that you can engage your community partner. Okay, photos. So this is really about helping to paint a picture of your garden, if it exists, or if not, then paint a picture of what the plan for your garden will be. So I'll show a couple of examples, but I just wanted to say first, we do ask for no more than 3 photos, but up to 3. The file size should be 5 megabytes or smaller, and the file type should be PNG, JPEG, or GIF. I've never seen someone upload a GIF, but that would be fun. Should include photos of the garden space, but it does not need to include photos of children. If you do want to upload photos of your garden that include children, just make sure that you're sharing photos that are photo released. Okay, a couple examples. So these 2 examples here show a school, or 2 different schools, that does not yet have a garden. So this shows me where they want to put the garden, where they're envisioning building a garden. And that would be also something that you would be describing in your application. And then this next slide shows examples of diagrams. So this is like whether your garden, exists or not, you can hand draw, or use paint or Canva or any tool you want to show us generally like what you would like to have in your garden, the general layout. So you can see, well, it's probably kind of hard to see, but the hand-drawn one shows the different crops that will be planted in rows. And where that garden is located within the school's campus. And then on the right, the diagram shows, I think the key is not included, but it shows the different buildings, where the planters are going to go, etc. And we are not judging anyone on artistic skill or ability. This can totally be like a crude hand drawing. We just want to understand your plans. Okay. High level, the application and award process occurs from now until the fall. So it's quite a long time period. So of course, the application is open now and it will remain open through March 1st. Then for a few months, we conduct both due diligence, which is where we ensure that if you're applying as a school, that you're a real school, that if you apply with an organization, we make sure it's a valid organization, whether that's 501(c)(3) in the US or registered candidate charity in Canada. And so we're doing that work as well as at the same time reviewing your applications. We complete the selection in June and July and notify everyone, regardless of our decision, on August 1st. So then the month of August, is the time where the grantees who have been awarded will sign their grant agreement and also like coordinate their shipping details with us. And then we begin shipping in September. Typically, in the past, I would say we were able to do almost all of the shipping in September, but last year was our first year of increasing the number of grants by double, basically. We used to do maybe around 500. Last year we did over 900. And I will just say the shipping just takes a lot longer. So I would say that shipping occurs throughout the fall, just because it's so many packages and it's such a fun process. The on-hold process. So we aren't able to award every single school that applies, unfortunately. So we will have to place some schools on hold, but we do keep a list of these on-hold schools. And then as funds might become available later in the year, which has happened many years, we are sometimes able to award those on-hold schools. So, and then if not, we absolutely encourage and invite you to apply again in the next cycle. And resources. Like there's so many wonderful resources out there and a lot on our own website. So, for example, if you're like wanting to just like see what the application looks like and what's required, but you're not ready to actually start it, we have a Word doc version of the application on our website, and it'll be linked here, and I'll send these slides out. We have an FAQ page that's super helpful and answers a ton of our frequently asked questions. There's also a resource that's called Grant Writing Tips that we developed with Food Corps many years ago. And it's a wonderful resource, especially if this is your first grant or you've never applied to a grant before, that's totally fine. And don't be scared. I know grants can feel intimidating, but I promise you, we're not judging on things like grammar, spelling, anything like that, or writing, level. We're really just trying to understand your plans for the garden and award based on that. But that said, this tips doc is really helpful just to pull out some key considerations when you are crafting a grant application. So I highly recommend that. There is a training on that as well that I co-hosted with the Edible Schoolyard that can be found on their website under their resources as well. That's the Edible Schoolyard Berkeley. There is also a short YouTube video that is a tutorial on Smart Simple, which is our grant management platform that Andrea is going to introduce us to really shortly. But this YouTube is super helpful, and it's like, I think 8 or 9 minutes, and it's a great like intro into Smart Simple, because it can be a system where if you're in it for the first time, you might be like, what's going on here? So definitely recommend watching the tutorial. And then finally, we have an entire resource center for school garden resources that is just chock full of everything from curriculum to ideas to stories to books for a book club and everything in between. So definitely peruse our resources on our website if you haven't yet. I do want to call out one resource specifically before I pass it off to Andrea. We have this incredible toolkit called the Garden to Cafeteria Toolkit that we developed in partnership with Slow Food USA. And I would not say if you're like a very first time, if you're just starting a school garden, not quite for you, I would say, but like if you've had a school garden and you're ready to take that next step, there are ways to successfully get produce from the garden into your school cafeteria, which is an incredible thing and can be so impactful toward improving children's nutrition, getting kids engaged and involved. It's just such a cool thing. It's not easy, I would say, but we have this toolkit that's so helpful and provides templates. It provides exactly what to say to go to the principal or the district, how to get permission for that kind of thing, food safety. It covers so many different aspects of this. So this is a really wonderful resource if you are interested in going down that road. And with that, I will pass it off to Andrea. Thank you all for listening.
Hello, I'm going to go over just our online application portal and just some tips. There are some QR codes on the screen, but we'll also share out these links. The first one is going to be to our Smart Simple database, which is where the online application is hosted, and then another QR code to that short Smart Simple tutorial, which is super helpful when registering. And then we can go to the next slide. So for returning applicants, you can either, once you open the online portal, just get on there and put in your email and password and hit login. If you're not remembering your password, there is a forgot password button and it'll send a reset link to your email. If this is the first time you're logging on, you will actually hit the register here button at the bottom, and that'll take you to the next slide. This quick questionnaire. It's just going to be asking you a few questions so that you can let us know what type of entity you are. For the garden grant, it is for schools, so you'll likely just be selecting whether you're in the US or Canada, and then you'll be selecting US school, public or private. Or if you're in Canada, there will only be one option. It'll just be school. For US private schools, just make sure you're selecting US school, and private school. Even though you guys have EIN, most likely, you'll still register as a school. And then it'll ask you to look up your school. So for US, you'll be using the NCES database to look up your school. There is a database for private and for public. And if you go to the next slide, when you're searching the NCS database through Smart Simple, we like to say less is more. It is very case sensitive. So I would just put like one of the keywords from your school name and the city to search for it. Or if you know your ID offhand, you can also just enter the ID in and it should be able to populate it there. You're also welcome to just search through the NCS database and find your information there, and then you can log it into the NCS database in Smart Simple. And then once you do that, it'll take you back to our main screen, and that will give you the opportunity to fill out some information. Anything that's grayed out is auto-populated from the NCES database, but the white boxes will be where you're filling out. So like your school name, street address, etc. Anything with an asterisk is what you're going to want to fill out. And then next slide, for Canada, you'll be using your CRA number, and there is a link to look at the CRA database. I do just want to note that for CRAs, it's going to often be associated with your school board. So if you're not sure what your CRA number is, we recommend reaching out to your admin. But if you can't find your CRA number at all, in this blue directions box, there's the last line that says, if you're unable to look up your school CRA number, there is a link. If you click that link, it'll actually take you to a different page where you can bypass the CRA number, and then we will just work with you to get that information afterwards. And then once you've registered, you'll get this registration complete page. It's just letting you know that you've officially registered, and then you'll receive an email with your login credentials, so your username and password to log into our portal. Next slide. And then just some tips with registrations. Like we said, be liberal in your search terms when you're using the NCS database or the CRA database. Once you have gotten that information, you'll want to select your state before it'll actually let you select your county. We do recommend using Google Chrome as your browser. Smart Simple tends to work the best there. And make sure your Google Chrome is up to date. Read the directions on each page very carefully. There's a lot of information there. I know it's very easy to glance over, but there's a lot of good information there. And if you have any questions or get stuck, you can reach out to us at grants@wholekidsfoundation.org. Just a 5-second break of garden joy because this is a lot of heavy information. And then we'll get back to it So once you sign in, this is what your applicant portal will look like. There are going to be a few buttons that I'm going to call out. So at the very top, it says welcome to your Whole Kids application portal. And then in this blue font, it'll tell you which organization you were signed in as. If you only have one school, it'll likely just say the school, but some of you might be applying for multiple schools. So that'll let you know which profile you're actually on. And then there's going to be register new organization. So if you are applying for multiple organizations or schools, you can use that button to register for the additional schools. Your organization profile is just to fill out all the information. Please make sure to go in there and fill out anything with an orange asterisk. It'll help us when reviewing grant applications. And then your personal profile is how you can update your email, phone number, and password. And there's also a change password button if you do need to update your password. Once you signed in, there is going to be this panel on the left-hand side that says funding opportunities. That's where you're going to see our garden grant application. You'll just hit the green apply now button to open that up. There's also my applications. And if you've applied previously and you have a draft, you might see those there, but you'll want to hit apply now if you are applying for the grant this year. And then we're going to go over some fiscal sponsor stuff. Fiscal sponsors are not required. They are a nonprofit entity that will receive and be responsible for the grant funds on behalf of the applying entity. So likely it'll be a PTA, PTO, school district, or a nonprofit organization that you're working with. Again, it is not required that you have one, but if you do have one, someone from the fiscal sponsor entity will sign the grant agreement and the check will be made out to the fiscal sponsor on behalf of the school. And for fiscal sponsors, you'll actually register those once you've opened up the application on behalf of the school. It's going to be one of the first things you see. It's fiscal sponsor / grantee, and you'll just say yes or no whether you have one. If you say yes, then it'll ask you if it's for US or Canada. And then if you've already registered the fiscal sponsor for a previous application or you've applied in the past years, you can just search their name. But if this is the first time you're registering this fiscal sponsor, you'll hit the green register new fiscal sponsor button, and it'll just ask you for their EIN number or their CRA number for Canada. And it'll just be a few questions to answer there. And then we can go to the next page. One of the next questions that you're going to be answering is actually about the grantee organization name. So this is just to kind of help you guys understand who you should be listing for that field. So you should ask who will sign the agreement and receive the grant check. So if you have a fiscal sponsor, then you should be using the fiscal sponsor's name for the grantee organization field. If you do not have a fiscal sponsor, then you should use the applying entity or your organization / school's name for the grantee organization field. We go to the next slide. This will show you just where you will be filling that information out. And then we have the extended community partners. We would love to know everyone you're working with, so you can select how many you're working with, and then you'll just add their contributions there. And then there are 3 sections to our budget section. You're going to have your annual garden expenses. So this is how much it's going to cost to run your program yearly, year to date. So this is like maintenance year over year. And then for the next section is grant funding allocation. So this is how you're specifically going to be using the $3,500 if awarded. And you will just list like items, and they don't have to be exact numbers. They can be estimates of how much you're going to spend. And then we have the projected garden revenue. So this is if we understand you might be getting other funding. This is just like listing that funding so that we kind of have a better idea of your garden as a whole. And then just some final tips. Get started early. This gives you optimal time to reach out to us if you run into any issues. And then remember, where does / will the garden live? Complete all parts of the application to the best of your ability, making sure to fill out all of the fields with the orange asterisk. Check your email junk folders because Smart Simple email sometimes will get filtered into your junk folder. And reach out to us if you get stuck. We do have a 1 to 3 day response time, but we will try to get to you as soon as possible.
Woohoo! Perfect timing with 15 minutes left to spare. And I believe we have addressed most of the questions in the chat and in the Q&A, but I'll touch on a couple of those that I think a lot of folks might have. So let's see. There was a couple in the Q&A I wanted to point out. Um, I mentioned early care education. To clarify, our grant is not eligible for early care education or pre-K sites. I was saying there are other grants, not from us, but I would check out Kids Gardening. They're a great resource. Um, let's see. Oh, and please ask additional questions in the Q&A as well, and we will try to get to all of them. Let's see. Can the garden be across the street from the school? Yes, but we would want to know that your school has permission from the landowner, whoever owns that site. And it should be within walking distance, like under 5 minutes, I would say. Oh yeah, we get this question a lot. Can the grant funds be used for wages for like garden instructors, to be implementing garden curriculum within the school garden? So yes, that is an acceptable use of funds. However, I do encourage grantees to think about sustainable funds for instruction over time. This grant is $3,500 and it's one time. You can get a max, lifetime max of two of these grants, but that's not going to pay for a garden educator forever. So we love to see plans for sustainability. So like it's totally fine if you're like, okay, this year we're going to use part of it for this stipend for this educator. And then in the future, we're working with the PTA on a fundraising strategy or whatever it is. There's so many different ways. Or maybe you're applying to different grants, or you're going to partner up with the local master gardeners or environmental council or something. So yes, it is allowable, but also be thoughtful about the sustainability and longevity of your program over time. There was a few questions about like we have, like a few schools in a district, and one of the schools got the garden grant, but not the other one. Every school is treated individually, and eligibility is handled according to each individual school. So definitely try to register your school, if not already register on the website. And with any more specific questions, happy to answer those by email. Let's see. Okay, I got a new one. Garden revenue. Can we find more detail around this? I did add this year a couple sentences and examples of that in the application that you'll see, but offhand, I would say, I guess I mentioned a couple of those just now. So I've seen all kinds of different fundraisers happening. Like sometimes kids do fundraisers, sometimes PTA does fundraiser. There are a lot of different grants to apply for. There are ways to partner with local and community organizations that can both help monetarily and with in-kind donations. We have seen school gardens that come up with a business model to sell either produce or products from the garden. That can be a really cool thing, not only for financial sustainability, but also for like a youth entrepreneurship angle and kind of really cool way to engage youth in like a business. Those are just a few examples off the top of my head. I do believe we also have a resource on this in our school garden grant resources page on the website. So if you go to our website and to the resources section within the garden grant, I believe you can search for revenue or like, how do I fund my garden? And we'll have some resources around that. Oh, got a few more questions. Okay. Oh my gosh, a lot more. Okay. I guess it just loaded. Okay, so just to clarify, a school that has received funding in 2024 or before is eligible to apply? Yes, as long as you have not received already two grants and you have completed the progress report and are eligible in all the other ways. For a 501c3 nonprofit that operates a youth build program, would the org qualify as a school or so yeah, let's see. Um, Destiny, I think I need a little more information. If you don't mind emailing us, we can sort that out. by email. Sometimes it's a little tricky to figure out, are you a school? Is this the school? Is this the org? Which entity is which? So on kind of special cases, please email us and we'll address your question that way. Are the odds good, Maureen? Yes. So earlier in the presentation, I said that we usually get around 1,000 apps per year. This year we're awarding 850 apps. I think the odds are pretty good. We also try to, for the schools that are eligible and that we would like to award, but we don't have the funds to, we'll put you on hold. And occasionally more funds become available throughout the year, and we're able to award funds later. Um, The B grant is separate from the lifetime max of 2. Yes. The B grant is set up a little bit differently. So yeah, you could, one single school could get 2 garden grants and technically actually 3 B grants. With the B grant, we allow 1 first-time application and then 2 what we call renewals, which are a smaller dollar amount to help sustain the hives and the program over time. Several campuses in your district would like to apply. Will each campus need to create its own account? Yes, every school will be its own account in the system. And a lot of schools are already in there. So for example, like some folks, if you're like newer to a school, you might go to Smart Simple, try to register and get a message that says like, your school has already been registered. It'll instruct you to email us. And that's because someone before you would have applied or created an account, and we will link you into that existing account. And that helps us make sure that we are monitoring like the lifetime amount of grants over time. So yeah, unfortunately, Chris, we would not do like a district level account. It would need to be unique accounts for each school. Can we purchase material for a hydroponic farm? Absolutely. All types of farms and gardens that grow edible food at schools are eligible. So yeah, we've seen everything from hydroponic, aquaponic, in-ground, raised bed, container gardening, rooftop container gardening, greenhouses. We've seen tower gardens, what else? I'm trying to think of literally every garden type I can think of. But yeah, I mean, if you can grow edible food and with kids at the school, it's probably fair game. Yes, we'll be sharing a recording of this. It will go out by email to every person that registered for this webinar. And we'll probably be able to send that either later today or tomorrow once we upload this to YouTube. And then we will also post the recording on our website. So please feel free to send this to any friends or other schools or other families that might be interested as well. Yeah, if you, okay, so I'm seeing Adrian's question. If you apply for and receive a first-time garden grant, are you still eligible for a B grant? Yes, those are separate. And yes, Patricia, we did have an email typo, but if you scroll to the top in Andrea's pinned chat message, the email is written correctly there. So apologies for that. um, would a school that has a partnership with a community nonprofit garden still be eligible? Absolutely. The garden though should be on the school grounds. So I guess if you meant that the school goes to a off-site community garden, unless it's like right next door, that would not be eligible. But that garden could be a community partner if you wanted to have a garden site on your school grounds. So, Lena Berry is saying that they applied for the B grant as an organization. That is a difference in eligibility between the B grant and the garden grant. The B grant is still open eligibility wise to organizations, whereas the garden grant is not. Being a fiscal sponsor, yes, Rebecca. So, no, it does not necessarily mean there has to be like a donation. What a fiscal sponsor is really a few things, but a lot of times it's like Here's an example, like a school district might partner with a local nonprofit organization to administer garden education. Or maybe it's like Food Corps or something like that. And so we've seen a lot of schools partner up with a Food Corps, AmeriCorps, that kind of thing. And in those instances, it's easiest sometimes for that entity, the Food Corps, the AmeriCorps, the org, whoever it is, because they are the ones managing the garden, managing all the education. A lot of times it's easiest for them to receive the funds and administer those on behalf of the school for the school garden. So that's really what a fiscal sponsor is there for. When you have your garden at a school, but it's mostly going to be managed, administered by an entity that is a 501c3 nonprofit. Um, Adrian, if your private school is nonprofit, it likely is eligible, and it would need to have 501c3 status. And if you have any questions about that, you can email us. Oh, okay. Someone's having trouble with their EIN number. Go ahead and email us on that one. Yes, we'll share the recording. So, this is a good question from Bianca. Can nonprofits apply on behalf of the school, or should you guide the school? So the entity that applies should be the school. But if you are from a nonprofit, or say you're that AmeriCorps, you're a Food Corps or something like that, you can be the one to fill out the application, but the entity needs to be the school. And the fiscal sponsor, if you are the fiscal sponsor, you are going to be associated, and you'll see that in the application, you'll see where we ask for that. And Andrea showed that as well. But that kind of comes later. So the entity that you are applying on behalf of or for is always going to be the school. That can be someone at the school. It can be someone at an organization, as long as you both agree on it. And we also are always going to look for that permission, that letter of support from the head of school. Oh, the Newman's Own grant. Yes. So that the Newman's Own Foundation has generously donated $100,000 to the garden grant this year, and those funds will go into the awarding of 850 garden grants. So that that is just part of what's helping us fund 850 schools this year. So that shouldn't really look any differently to you, to the applicant. Last year it was done a bit differently. This year it'll be a lot more seamless and integrated. Um, your students are currently completing the project from last year. Are you allowed to apply again this year? It depends on what year you were awarded the grant. So if you try to apply in the system, it'll give you a pop-up if it is too soon. Or if you're not sure, you can just email us and we can tell you exactly when your school last got a grant from us. And we have like 2 minutes left, so I think there's a couple more questions here. And Andrea, jump in if you have anything as well. Um, So Deborah, if I'm understanding correctly, I think you're saying you're an organization, a 501c3, but you are supporting a garden at a school. And can you apply? Yes. So again, though, the entity would be the school, and you, the 501c3, would be the fiscal sponsor or community partner or both. So hopefully that is clear, but if not, email us. Where to submit your progress report? And yes, absolutely. So there's actually only one report. We call it a progress report, but it's the final report. So you only are asked to report on your fund usage one time. And right now it's set up that you are going to be prompted to do that 1 year after you receive the grant. So for all of our historic grantees, previous grantees, say you were a 2024 grantee, you will have already gotten the option to submit that grant report a year after you received it, that progress report. And all of that is in the grant management portal itself, Smart Simple. If you log into your portal, then you will be able to scroll down. There's a whole section that says progress reports, and you should see it there. If you don't, reach out to us. And I think that's perfect timing. I think it's noon, at least central. And I I think we got all the questions answered. Um, So thank you all so much for attending. And please do attend both the Q&A webinar if you still have more questions. You have our email address. And I also really encourage all of you to attend the March 5th Pilot Lights and Whole Foods Market Foundation webinar as well. That one's going to be really great and a great resource. Okay, thank you, everyone.